In this video, I'm showing you how I drew two apples on UArt 600 sanded paper using soft pastels. For the underpainting, I used Derwent Inktense, which is a block of water-soluble ink that becomes permanent when dry. They work really well along with soft pastels for underpaintings. And for the soft pastels, I used a variety of whatever I had on hand, but mostly Unisons, Rembrandts. I think there were a couple Terry Ludwigs and some Mount Vision as well, and those weren't listed in the supplies. So I start out by putting in my underpainting. And I'm just using various reds and purples, and I believe some blues at some part for this as well. The specific color of the underpainting doesn't have to match what your reference photo's final colors will be. I end up covering up most of this, or actually all of it in the end. But if you wanted to, you could leave some bits of the color peeking through at the end, in which case you would want to put a little thought into what colors you wanted your underpainting to be. I'm using this basically as a block-in of my general shapes where I'm going to want the apples and their shadows and that kind of thing, so I'm not too concerned with the colors in the background. Now starting on the apples, I always start out with my darkest colors in soft pastels, so I'm using some really dark purples. I think that's the Terry Ludwig eggplant color, which is one of my favorite pastel colors. So I start out with those dark purples and dark reds, and I'm following my reference photo, just trying to get the shadows on the apple correct. I'm not trying to get much detail at this point, and I'm not trying to get any of the highlights at the end. Those I will leave for the end of the drawing. With soft pastels, it's usually easier to go dark to light, though if you wanted to, you could go lighter to darker as well. And I'm just using my fingers to smudge in this case. Even though this is sanded paper, as long as you have a little bit of pastel on there, you're generally not tearing your fingers apart. And moving on to the second apple, using the same colors roughly as I used for the first one. Again, starting out with my dark reds, dark purples, and just following the shadows of the apple. Apples are a pretty good project to start with if you haven't used soft pastels before. They'll help you learn shading and blending, and they're kind of fun to do. You can do green ones, you can do red ones, so there's a little bit of flexibility in working with them. And I'm using some of the colors in the apple as the shadows beneath then. As the pastel falls off the paper, I'm using my fingers to smudge underneath where it's falling. So it kind of adds a little bit of the shadow, and I don't have to waste pastel. And adding some more vibrant colors to my shadows. I used like a brighter purple in there along with my dark purples. Continuing to work on the shading of the apples and adjusting the coloring a bit, adding some more middle range values of my reds and a couple pinks as well. And at this point I still wasn't really sure what I wanted to do for the coloring on the background, so you'll see me play around with a couple different colors and make some adjustments as we go. And we added in the stem of the apple on the left there, and you notice there is a little bit of a shadow underneath the stem as well. That helps it make it look a little more realistic. For the highlights on the apples, it's I think a light purple color, but the exact color of the highlight doesn't exactly matter. And decided at this point I wanted to go with a darker background, so I'm making sure that I smudge a little bit of the background into the apples that are in the foreground, because I don't want the apples to look like they're sitting on top of the background. And deepening my shadows beneath the apples. And lightening up that foreground a bit, decided it was a little bit too dark. The great thing about soft pastels if you put something down that you don't like, it's pretty easy to either smudge it out or cover it up. So it's very forgiving. You can always go back and adjust what you don't like. So don't be afraid to keep working at it. A couple more adjustments to the coloring on the apples and the shadows. Decided I needed to make that back apple a little bit darker. And adjusting the shine with that light purple. And that piece of paper on the left there is just my scratch paper to test out my pastels on. And here is the finished piece. If you guys have any questions, feel free to comment below, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.